Hello, beautiful people of the internet. How are you doing today? My name is Jackie, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today in this video, I am going to be reviewing all of the books that I read in the month of September 2021. In the month of September, I read 6 books for a total of 2,009 pages. Last month, I read 2,002. This month, 2009. So hey, we're going up, just a couple pages at a time. My average star rating for this month was 3.25 out of 5. I had 2 books that I really enjoyed, 3 3-star reads, and then 1 1-star read. So let's go over all of the books that I read in the month of September. First, I read Let Me Lie by Claire Mackintosh. This was my 3rd Claire Mackintosh book, and I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I had generally very mixed feelings on it overall. There is a reading vlog where I read this book and share some of my thoughts without spoilers, so go check that out in the card if you are so inclined. This is a mystery thriller book following a new mother named Anna. I think her name was Anna. And a year ago, Anna's mother and father died supposedly by suicide in quick succession. However, Anna has always had a hard time believing that her parents would die by suicide. So when she receives a note implying that her parents' deaths were not what they appeared, she latches onto that and becomes convinced that they were actually murdered. This was honestly just a very generic thriller read. I thought it was fine, but it's nothing that I'm going to remember a year or 2 from now. In that reading vlog, I do discuss some specific instances in the book of things that I thought were problematic and potentially offensive. I hate saying problematic or like problematic fave because newsflash, every single thing in this world is problematic. Me, you, every single book that we read. You're never going to find anything that's completely morally pure. However, I do think there were things in this book that were potentially offensive and that went unchecked. Considering suicide is a theme dealt with in this book, I felt like the way suicide was framed was offensive because I think there were certain lines in the book that made it seem like people who die by suicide are selfish, and that is just not the truth. I will say, in vague terms, so as not to spoil anything, the relationship between Anna, the main character, and the father of her child, in my opinion, has a huge power imbalance, and that is at no point in the book discussed, which was very odd to me because it did not seem to me like an example of a healthy relationship at all. And also, I could not root for Anna herself because she came across to me as extremely judgmental. She has recently had a child, and it seems to me like she is judgmental of people who choose not to have children, like she's incapable of understanding that's a valid lifestyle choice some people make and not everybody should or will become a parent. There was a good twist in this book that I did not see coming, so I enjoyed that part. There was one character who I pegged as suspicious very early on, and to not spoil anything, my suspicions were later proven correct, so I did get some parts of the book right and others I didn't see coming. Overall, this wasn't a bad book, but it really just wasn't that memorable in my opinion. It was just overall okay. Next up, I read a non-fiction book, and that was Four Queens, The Provincial Sisters Who Ruled Europe by Nancy Goldstone, and I gave this 4.5 stars. This was my first book by Nancy Goldstone, and I am definitely interested in reading her other works of historical non-fiction now because overall I thought this was a very enjoyable and informative read. This is a historical non-fiction book about four sisters living in medieval Europe who all became queens. There was Isabel, who became the Queen of France, Eleanor, who became the Queen of England, Sancha, who became the Queen of Germany, and Beatrice, who became the Queen of Sicily. Though this is a non-fiction work, it is, in my opinion, very easy to read and has a level of detail that makes it feel almost like it is historical fiction. I really enjoy reading books about medieval history, and one thing that I see historians do sometimes that personally bothers me is they have an interpretation of why a historical figure did a certain thing or what they must have been thinking in that moment, and they present that as a given when the reality is the medieval times were not always properly documented, and sometimes there's going to be blanks in the historical record. It's impossible for us to know what a king or queen or anybody else was thinking in a given moment if they didn't write it down, which many of them did not. But I appreciate that Nancy Goldstone could differentiate between things that are more concretely known and things that were just her hypothesis or her opinions. Like, for example, she might say, so-and-so might have done this for this reason, or this reason, or this reason, but regardless of what they were thinking, we know this is what happened next. And I appreciated that, though she would sometimes give her opinions, she was pretty good at making it clear that they were her opinions and not known fact. My only two issues with this book were, well, one, at one point there was a term used for a mentally handicapped person that, to be honest, when Nancy Goldstone was writing this book in the early 2000s, I know a lot of people probably used this term. When I was younger, I heard people throw this term around casually all the time. Nowadays, in 2021, I would hope that most of us would recognize that this term is offensive and that it should not be used to refer to people. And the other issue that I had was very close to the end of the book. I noticed a pretty obvious historical error that was not caught in editing, and so because I saw that, it did make me question a little bit if maybe there were other factual errors throughout the book that the editors didn't catch and that I didn't catch. It's a little bit unfortunate because it did make me wonder if maybe there were more errors, but why I liked this book so much is because it was very easy to read, it seemed to have a lot of detail and research, and I really enjoyed the way that Nancy Goldstone brought these four sisters to life and let us know more about their lives and their personalities. So overall, I would recommend this book if you're into medieval historical nonfiction. Next up, I read my favorite book of the month, and that was 1,000 Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. I gave this book 5 stars. It was such a emotional, heartbreaking, moving story. It was just so well done. I literally cried while reading this. That does not happen to me a lot. I'm not going to tell you much about the plot of this book because the summary on the dust jacket is very vague. I went into this book knowing very little about it, and so I don't want to give too much away. This takes place in Afghanistan over a period of many years and primarily follows 2 women, Maryam and Layla, both of whom I really felt for and really grew to love over the course of the story. This story was so well written and it just made me feel so many feelings over the course of the book. It was just really heartbreaking, but also really moving, and I think a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Like I said, the 2 main characters, I really connected with them and I cared so much about their happiness. I wanted to see the best for them, and the end of the book, there was a thing that happened which literally made me cry. I wish that I had a video of me crying while reading that part of the book. I would love to know what I looked like. It started off with just one tear rolling down my face, and I didn't realize that I was crying until I tasted it on my mouth. And then I was continuing to read, and eventually it got to a point where I could barely see the page because my eyes were filled with tears and just all glassy. I couldn't read the page. I had to take a moment. I had to take a moment before I could keep going. And I don't cry at books that often. I really don't cry at fictional things that much. So the fact that this book made me ugly cry lets you know how good it is. I really enjoyed this book. I think you should read it if it sounds at all interesting to you. Just be warned though, this book has so many potentially triggering topics. Warfare, obviously, constant warfare, lots of death, people losing limbs, forced marriage, teenage pregnancy, miscarriage, so many potentially triggering topics. A lot of domestic violence and domestic abuse, marital rape. So, you know, there are a lot of trigger warnings for this book. It is very intense, and that's something you should know before you go in. Do not read this book if you think it's going to negatively impact your mental health. So now we move from 1,000 Splendid Suns to a book that I hated with the fire of 1,000 suns. Yeah, hot take. I gave 1 star to Normal People by Sally Rooney. Granted, let me preface this by saying this was assigned for my in real life book club, and had it not been, I never would have read this because it never sounded interesting to me to begin with. It's not the type of book that I would usually read, and generally speaking, I never really enjoy literary fiction because 9 times out of 10, I find it extremely pretentious, to be honest. So just because I hated this book doesn't necessarily mean you will. You might have different reading tastes than me, but personally, I didn't enjoy this book. This book follows 2 Irish teens, Connell and Marianne. They fall in love, they go to college, they have an on-again, off-again relationship. Some other stuff happens. To be completely honest, I would have DNF'd this book in the first chapter had it not been assigned for book club because the writing style was not to my personal taste. First of all, the book doesn't use quotation marks, and for some reason that's a huge bookish pet peeve for me. I don't like that. And the writing style is often very sparse, intentionally so, which I really didn't vibe with. The 2 main characters, Connell and Marianne, I don't know why, but I just could not emotionally connect with them in any way. I was not invested in them or their relationship. 99% of the side characters in this book are shallow at best or downright cruel and abusive at worst. I guess that was supposed to make me like Connell and Marianne more in comparison, but it didn't. I kind of just felt like all of the characters in this book were very flat and lacked depth or complexity. I didn't find any of them or their relationships to each other interesting. Also, this book is like really sexual in a way that kind of makes me uncomfortable. The first instance was very early on in the book. There's a line where Marianne thinks to herself that she would just love to watch Connell have sex. Not even with her. She would just love to watch him have sex with somebody else. Okay. I mean, if you're into that, cool, but I don't really want to hear about it. Yeah, asexual out. I don't understand the straights. No. Ultimately, in my opinion, a book's most basic premise is to tell an interesting story, and I wasn't interested or entertained by anything that was going on here, so that's why it really failed for me. But granted, there are so many people who think this book is the best thing since sliced bread. When I go to my book club meeting, I'll find out other people liked it. It's a very popular book, just was not at all for me. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's not for you. And hey, if you love this book, good for you. I'm glad you found something that you loved, okay? This is just my personal opinion. It wasn't for me. Next, I read This Side of Paradise by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I buddy read this with Naomi from Naomi's Bookshelf, and ultimately I gave this book 3 stars. It was a book that's been on my TBR for a long time. My dad bought me this years ago because I loved The Great Gatsby in high school, so I'm glad I finally read it. Overall, it was just an okay read for me. This Side of Paradise is F. Scott Fitzgerald's first novel, and it is semi-autobiographical based on some real events from his life and real people he actually knew. It follows our main character, Amory Blaine, from a young age to when he goes to Princeton. He has several romantic relationships throughout the book, and actually what I found really interesting was that F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote this book in an attempt to win back Zelda, his future wife. She had refused to marry him, believing that he had no prospects. So he decided, you know, I just have to get a book published so that she'll marry me. And that's what happened. So the plan worked out for him. Overall, I just found the plot of this book a bit lacking. None of the characters really caught my interest, so I wish there had been a little bit more emotional investment. I feel bad because Naomi and I were buddy reading this, and honestly, I didn't have anything to say about it. I was just like, yeah, this book's fine, I guess. So I'm sorry, Naomi, that I couldn't have contributed to more stimulating literary conversation. Overall, I'm glad that I finally read this after so many years, and damn, F. Scott Fitzgerald can really string a sentence together. There were some lines in this that just took me aback with their sheer lyrical beauty. This man knew how to write. And the final book that I read in the month of September was Dear Wife by Kimberly Bell, another mystery thriller and another book that I gave 3 stars. This is a domestic thriller that follows 3 different characters. There is Beth, who is on the run from an abusive husband. Then there's another man, what's his name?
Jeffrey.
I forget his name, but his wife Sabine has just disappeared and he doesn't know where she's gone. And then we also follow Marcus, who is the cop investigating Sabine's disappearance. Overall, I thought this book was okay. I wasn't wowed by it, and much like I said with Let Me Lie, though I felt like it was enjoyable enough, it's not something I'm going to remember a year or 2 from now. I know a lot of people really love the twist in this. Personally, I saw it coming, so I really wasn't surprised. I don't want to give too much away. I'll just say that I could tell there was an assumption the author wanted me to make, and so I was like, well, if she wants me to think this, that can't be true. Just a really hard person to fool with thriller books, honestly. Maybe it's because I want to write them myself, so I kind of know what to look out for. Actually, on a different note, I've been wondering if I should make a video talking about the things that in thrillers clue me in and help me predict the twists. I don't know if anyone will be interested in watching that video. And I also want to make a video talking about thrillers with twists that did surprise me, since I say so many times that I wasn't surprised. Sometimes authors do pull the wool over my eyes, and I like it when they do. I really, really enjoy a shocking twist. That's what I want when I read a mystery thriller. I want to be surprised. Another thing about this book that I want to mention is there has been some controversy because this book does include a character who is transgender, and there's been debate. Some people think the portrayal is offensive, other people think it isn't. I'm not trans, so I can't speak for them. I will just say that I personally felt like the author was trying to be inclusive, but I don't think it really stuck the landing. There was also a Latina character in this book, and I kind of feel like the way that her character was written was a little bit stereotypical. There were also just like some side plots in this book that really didn't go anywhere. They kind of just stopped being relevant, which was a little weird. And the ending was a little bit rushed. in my opinion. I'm not sure if this was the author's first book or not. I think it had some potential, but it really just needed a little bit more polish to be a truly memorable thriller. So those are all the books that I read in the month of September. Let me know, did you read any of the books that I read this month? If so, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments section. My social media links are in the description if you want to follow me on Tumblr, Instagram, or be my friend on Goodreads. Please give this video a big like if you enjoyed and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. I post new videos every single Wednesday. That's it for me right now, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an impeccable rest of your day. Bye, and I'll see you next time.